Chapter 91 Hellbringer, Chapter Preview. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. In a place which was situated who knows where, Death was casually sipping some coffee while reading a book. Billions of bookshelves surrounded him, each containing many books. In total, trillions of books surrounded him. These books were known as death books, and they contained information regarding a person's death, like the cause of death, the one who killed the person, the place of death, etc. Every single person in this universe had a death book, and it would open 5 minutes before their death. Or at least, Death had thought that every person in the universe had a book. But some people were out there without a death book. As he was simply drinking some coffee and reading his book, a red alarm started to resound in the library. He frowned as he put the book down as the shelves in front of him started to change their positions. Code Black on the Mortal Cultivation Realm. A mechanic voice resounded in the library as it changed itself to show the books belonging to the people living on the mortal cultivation world. Every book was arranged according to a particular realm and were further arranged according to the regions or continents present on that realm. Furthermore, the books were then arranged in alphabetical order so reapers could easily go and bring the souls to death. He would then use his scythe to collect those souls and would drop them in the darkness. But a code black was something he had not expected. Reapers started to appear beside Death as all the books belonging to the people living on the central continent started to open. They continued to open and only a single book was left. Death went forward and picked up the book as he checked the name written on the book. Rizia. Death said out loud as the Reapers gasped. The last time a code black had happened, an entire realm had been destroyed by Kai. This incident was named as the annihilation of the fairy realm and was marked in the history books. The Reapers had to do overtime to reap billions of souls, and Death had to travel to the darkness numerous times to deliver those souls. I guess you will have to do overtime again. Death said as the Reapers sighed as he put the book back. Boss. I have a question. One of the Reapers asked as Death nodded for him to continue. Were you reading an Arrow manga? The Reaper asked as he pointed at the image of the naked girls printed in the book. No, I was just reading a book. Death replied as the Reaper gulped. But sir, this is clearly Arrow manga. The Reaper protested. And I say it's a book. How many times will I have to repeat myself? This is a book. Case closed. Death said as the Reaper closed the book. The other Reapers sighed at their boss's behavior. Death was the most shameless man in the entire universe. Not even the legendary Kai could compare to Death's shameless. Speaking of Kai, the Reapers started to teleport to the mortal cultivation wood to see what was happening. The purple mist gathered behind Kai's back as two dark purple wings tore through Kai's clothes. The entire throne room was blasted apart as his wings completely unfolded. They were enormous and had a purple mist wrapped around the edges. A feather dropped down from his wings and the ground around it started to crack. Outside, screams started to rise as storms started to brew in the ocean. Even though it felt as though the royal capital was in the middle of the continent, it was actually closer to the edge of the continent so that the members of the royal family could enjoy the view. But currently, the view was extremely terrifying. Dark clouds covered every inch of the sky as thunder struck repeatedly. A tornado appeared in the middle of the ocean and soon turned into a cyclone followed by 5 more cyclones. The land trembled as a few cracks appeared on the surface and screams rang out in the streets. But Kai didn't care about any of these. It was as though he could hear nothing. He slowly rose in the sky as his wings started shimmering. Remember when he said that seeing Rizia's condition, my demonic side was released? I didn't think that he literally meant that. Mia said as nature continued to roar. Do you think we can stop him? Mariel asked. There is nothing we can do to stop him. But it doesn't hurt to try. Mia replied, but before either one of them would do anything, nature attacked Kai. A bolt of lightning directly fell on Kai, but it was absorbed by Kai's wings. He then stared at the cyclones as they vanished before his gaze. What is he? Is he the demon king from the outcasts' myths? Tianjin asked in a terrified voice as Rizia stared at Kai in amazement. The rest of the Fong family also gathered in the throne room as they stared at the demon king. Mia and Mariel moved forward and stood beside Rizia. At the same time, Kai roared as Mia and Mariel suddenly clutched their right breast. Even Rizia clutched her right breast as the three of them screamed in agony. Memories entered their minds without their permission. Memories belonging to Kai started to play in front of their eyes. There are only 4 types of demons. A younger version of Kai asked the demon empress Rias. No, there is a 5th category of demons. They are known as true demons. They have unique colored demon eyes. Lilith, the first demon, had all 3 common demon eye colors. Her first descendant, Lucifer, had complete gray eyes, and a few millennials ago, there was a demon with complete green eyes. The reason they are known as true demons is because when their emotions are conflicted, they go full rampage on the nearest thing they see. And it's almost impossible to defeat them in rampage mode. Ria said as the scene changed. This time, it was the scene where Kai and Rizia were battling Azazel. They only got a glimpse of the battle for about 5 seconds, but it was enough time for them to examine the sword in Rias's hands. It was the same black sword that Kai had used on some previous occasions. Mia and Mariel remembered the name of the sword. Hellbringer was the name of the sword, and it was a special sword that could only be used by the active ruler of the demon clan. The sword was special since it could wield the power of the 7 deadly sins, the strongest demons to ever exist. It was said that all of them could defeat Lilith single-handedly. Since it could harness a share of their power, the sword was overpowered. However, if anyone other than the active ruler of the demon clan touched the sword, they would be absorbed by the sword and would cease to exist. Mia and Mariel didn't understand how Kai could wield that sword without being absorbed by it. But before they could think about it, another memory played in front of them. It was Kai with purple demon eyes and his dark purple wings. The fairy realm was in front of him as he stared at it from the space. He held an unconscious Rizia in his left arm as he glared at the fairy realm. Hellbringer appeared in his right hand as the power of the sins shone brightly on the sword. He raised the sword above his head and swung it at the realm. The sword extended by many folds and reached the end of the realm. As Kai swung it, the sword cut through the realm as though it was paper. Tremendous amounts of spiritual energy was released from the dividing of the realm. Within a few minutes, the 2 halves started to vanish as the entire realm vanished into nothingness. And with that, Mia and Mariel returned to the real world to see Rizia releasing her hold on her chest. Even though she didn't see Kai's memories, she still felt a little pain in her right chest. As for what caused this pain, it was Kai's harem mark burning because of Kai's transformation. It was because of the mark that Mia and Mariel were able to view Kai's memories. But now, as they glanced at Kai, they didn't know whether they could stop him or not. The ground rumbled once again as the yellow dragon made its appearance. The royal family and the citizens of the royal capital cheered as they believed the yellow dragon would save them, but Mia and Mariel gravely stared at it. Kai just lifelessly stared at the yellow dragon and Hellbringer appeared in his hand. The purple mist covered the sword as in one smooth motion, Kai shattered the heart of the yellow dragon. The yellow dragon's lifeless body fell through the sky as the last drop of hope left the people of the central continent. Chapter 92 The Sin of Greed, Chapter Preview. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Fuck it. He is just a boy, we can kill him if we combine our powers. Tianjin said as the royal family released their cultivation. Mia and Mariel knew it was a last-ditch attempt, but they had to stop Kai from destroying the mortal realm. Mariel's wings and tail appeared from her clothes as she summoned her sword. Mia's clothes also changed as the scepter of the ice goddess appeared in her hands. The royal family directed their power at Tianjin as he focused all of that power into the earth. An earth dragon appeared from the ground and it was twice as large as the dead yellow dragon. Tianjin directed the earth dragon towards Kai. Mia and Mariel released their cultivation as their left eyes changed color. They used the harem mark to share their powers as wings made from ice appeared behind Mia. Enve they raised their hands towards Kai as two eastern dragons appeared from their arms. One was made from purple flames while the second one was made from eternal ice, the upgraded version of the unmeltable ice. The three dragons merged together as they reached in front of Kai. But with one slash of Hellbringer, they vanished. "There is nothing we can do," Mariel said, and it was over. In Kai's mind, he was seeing everything play out in front of him, but he didn't want to stop even though he knew he should. He knew that if he didn't stop, he might destroy the entire realm, but he still didn't want to stop. He felt Sinbringer tugging at his emotions, wanting him to destroy everything. And he was tempted to do it. He raised Hellbringer as his demon version opened his mouth. "The 7 deadly sins," he said in a hoarse deep voice as the people of the continent suddenly clutched at their throats. Kai never spoke the name of any skill he used, but to use the power of the sins, he had to call out for a particular sin. And to punish the royal capital, he knew the perfect sin to call. Black balls of light shot out from everyone's throats and started to gather near Sinbringer. One by one, every single one of them was absorbed by Hellbringer as the mist around the sword started to darken. It turned completely black and some of it started to travel down Kai's arms. Mia, Mariel, and Rizia were the only people who didn't clutch at their throats, and no black balls of light shot out from their throats. Their harem marks started to burn brightly as a golden aura gilded their bodies. The glow healed Rizia's wounds and her entire body was how as good as new. Even in rampage mode, he is subconsciously protecting us. Mia sighed as Kai spoke again. "The sin of greed." His voice echoed around the entire continent as he slashed Hellbringer towards the ground. Millions of swords started to appear in the sky, all of them looking exactly like Hellbringer, but they weren't covered with a mist. They trained down in the entire continent, slaughtering millions of people brutally. People screamed in agony as they tried to avoid the raining swords, but it was impossible as the swords cut through everything. Blood started to fill the streets as Rizia gasped and threw up. Mia and Mariel couldn't blame her since it was her first time seeing a massacre. But both of them had seen many wars since one of them was a princess while the other was a ruler. When it looked as though everyone was dead and the swords were gone, Hellbringer itself touched the surface of the continent and cut it in half. Large amounts of spiritual energy was released as Hellbringer cut through the spiritual core of the continent, which provided it with spiritual energy. The released spiritual energy traveled through the air and hit Kai in the stomach. His body started absorbing the spiritual energy at a rapid pace. Within minutes, his body had absorbed every single drop of the released spiritual energy. His Cultiva 6 ion started to rise rapidly. Second stage of the Imperial Spirit Realm, third stage of the Imperial Spirit Realm, fourth stage, fifth stage. And it continued to rise as it stopped on the 10th stage. No, it didn't stop. Rather, it was stopped by Kai himself as his eyes started to change back to his original eyes. He took a few deep breaths as his eyes completely turned back to normal. His wings vanished as he lightly landed on the ground. Seeing all the blood and dead bodies around him, he sighed and sat down in a clean spot. He then stared at nothing except it wasn't nothing. He was staring at Death, who was wielding his scythe with a mysterious smile. Kai then stood up and bit his right finger as golden blood trickled down from his finger. Death smiled at Kai one last time as he had ordered the Reapers to teleport back to the library. The Reapers were confused by Death's actions since they didn't understand why he told them to teleport back. Watch closely. One of the main reasons I took an interest in Kai was because of this. Death said as he pointed at the empty bookshelves that contained the books that belonged to the people of the central continent. The Reapers gasped as one by one, new books started to appear on the bookshelves. Within minutes millions of new books filled the bookshelves. He can create new death books for the same person. After someone dies, their soul hovers above their body for a few minutes before you guys take it. He can see that soul, and with that soul, he can create a new body which would inhabit the soul. The person would have every single one of their memories again, since the soul contains the memories. And because of that, they are reborn with a new book, since a death book is based on a particular soul and not the living body. Death explained as he went up to the shelves and picked up a certain book that was disappearing in his hands. The book had Rizia's name written on it. Rizia could only stare in amazement as the massacre's people started to rise again, even though their eyes were hazy and unfocused. The blood and severed body parts vanished and the continents started to join back together. "Please catch me," Kai said as he touched two of his fingers to his head. His spiritual sense spread across the entire continent as he did a mass memory manipulation. He made everyone forget about the past few hours as his body trembled a little. His legs gave up as his face implanted into Mia's boobs. "Talk about inner demons," she said with a smile as Rizia watched the couple's interaction. She then looked at the other girl whose name was Mariel, as Rizia expected her to be jealous. But instead, Mariel was also smiling as she moved to stand beside Mia. "Please don't make bad jokes." Kai's muffled voice was heard as he stood back up. "Guess I will catch you now," Mariel said as Kai touched the surface of the continent. Spiritual energy traveled through his veins into the continent. He tried to repair the continent's core to the best of his abilities. In the end, the core was back to 50% of its energy. Instead of stumbling like before, Kai's eyes rolled back and he was unconscious. And just like Mariel had said, she caught Kai and spread her wings. Mia suddenly picked up Rizia as Mia and Mariel rose up. They started heading towards the west and people started to wake up, confused about what they were doing. Kai had eradicated their memories about Tianjin and other corrupt members of the royal family. The people now knew that the ruler was someone else, someone fair and wise. Out in the forest, the outcasts woke up and knelt down to Jai, some reluctantly than others. But in the end, all of them knelt. The two men from earlier who had brought Kai and the group to HQ along with Jai stood up and knelt in front of Jai. "We will serve you, leader," both of them said at the same time as Jai nodded. One by one, every person present there said those words. The women were cheerful with a newfound hope, whereas some men gritted their teeth in frustration. But Jai didn't care about those men. She would make them listen to her orders, one way or the other. "Thank you, Kai," she thought as she stared at the sun, thinking about the person who helped her achieve what she wanted. She then looked at her people, and with that, a new age for the central continent began. As for Kai and the others, they quietly flew away from the central continent towards their new home, the Blue Moon sect, and the western continent. Chapter 93 Rizia's Life on the Central Continent, Chapter Preview. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 93 Rizia's Life on the Central Continent, Chapter Preview. Warning. This chapter contains depictions of self-harm and other things that might not be suitable for certain readers. Read ahead on your own risk, or you can skip this chapter. Rizia stared in amazement as she and the other three people flew over the ocean. It was her first time flying and seeing the ocean from this close. But she didn't let her guard down. Even though these three people saved her from the Fong family, who knows where they were taking her. But she knew one thing. No matter what happens, she won't break. After all, she had been accustomed to a lifetime's worth of abuse. Her mother had died from a heart attack when Rizia was 8 years old. And after her mother's death, her father had turned into a drunken maniac and a gambler. On most days he would be out gambling, but when he was home, he would always be drunk and would beat Rizia. After a few beatings, Rizia started to run away to a nearby forest to hide herself. One day, she noticed a group of cultivators coming to the forest to hunt a few spiritual beasts. The cultivators had belonged to a nearby sect and were here to collect some spiritual cores. But unfortunately, they ran into a hell spirit realm spiritual beast. In total, there were 5 cultivators, 2 men and 3 women, and all of them were in the sky spirit realm. They tried to run away from the beast, but it was quick and decisive and it cut off their escape route. With no escape path left, the cultivators had no choice but to fight the beast even though they were at a huge disadvantage. But one of them was injured gravely and the beast pounced on her so that he could kill her. But Rizia unconsciously picked up a stone from the ground and threw it at the beast. It distracted the beast for a moment and the others killed it. After killing the beast, they thanked Rizia. The girl who was nearly killed by the beast introduced herself as Chunhua and told Rizia that she was the sect master's daughter. When Rizia returned home that night, she saw some unknown men standing outside her home. They were taking away their furniture. When she stared at her dad's beaten face, she knew that these people were here because of her father's gambling debts. "We will take away your daughter once she comes home and once she is old enough, we will use her to obtain some money." She heard one of the men speak to her dad and she quietly bolted away. Despite being 8 years old, Rizia was much smarter than most adults. She quickly understood the situation and she knew that she could only survive if she ran. But strangely, she ran into Chunhua who was coming to visit her. She quickly told Chunhua about her situation and Chunhua said that she could help her. Chunhua took Rizia to her sect and asked her father to let Rizia join the sect. After some persuasion, the sect master agreed to take Rizia in. And after that, she spent the most wonderful years of her life in that sect. She and Chunua grew closer and became inseparable. It was like they were sisters, but it all started tumbling down when Rizia found out that she was an alchemy expert. The first time, she created a perfect quality pill. It was in an alchemy examination room and the sect elder in charge of the test and the sect master saw it. And after that, they continued to test Rizia's ability and that's when they found out that Rizia could create new pills alongside pure quality pills. But they were a little careless as the news about Rizia reached the ears of the Fong family. Within a week, the crown prince of the Fong family, Fong Sungjin, arrived at the sect's doorstep. He asked the sect master to hand over Rizia but the sect master protested against it but he was quietened by Sungjin or at least that's what Rizia thought happened. But when the imperial guards started to take Chunhua away with Rizia, the sect master showed his true colors. "Why, father? Why?" Chunhua screamed as the guards took a hold of her arms. The sect master, her father, smiled at Chunhua before walking up to her. He then lifted her chin so that she could stare into her eyes. "You are no child of mine. Your mother was a whore and she had sex with another man and he is your father. I didn't know about this until a few months back when that stupid fool came asking for his daughter and told me that he had sex with my wife. I of course killed him but I investigated him to see if he was lying or not. And it turned out that your mother really had sex with him. So when His Highness here offered me a large sum of money for the two of you, how could I refuse him? After all, you are going to be his concubine." The sect master said as the guards tightly closed their arms around her. Chunhua screamed as Sungjin watched her with satisfaction. But Rizia knew that Chunhua kept a knife under her clothes and she dreaded what was about to happen. The guards loosened their grip for a split second as Chunhua bit their hands. In one swift motion, she took out the knife and slit their throats before she shakily put the knife near her throat. "No, Chunhua!" Rizia screamed but she was restrained by the guards. Sungjin was watching this with a satisfied smile on his face as Chunhua's entire body trembled. Still, her face lit up with a small smile as she looked at Rizia. "Remember Rizia, never break down. No matter what happens, never break down. Don't give them the satisfaction of knowing that they are in your head. I am not strong enough to do that but I know that you can do it. Stay strong Rizia." Chunhua said with a smile as tears trickled down her eyes. And with that, she slit her throat. But Rizia didn't scream. She steeled her nerves and kept on an expressionless face as the guards took her to the prince's carriage and entered it with her. Sungjin entered the carriage after a few minutes and sat on the opposite side of Rizia who was being restrained by 2 guards on either roof or sides. From now on, you will do what I say and you will not think for yourself and will only do anything I order you to do. Now strip. Sungjin said as Rizia spat at his face. He smiled and wiped her spit with the sleeve of his robes. He then told the guards to lower to the floor. Already disobeying my orders. I will have you teach you a lesson. Sungjin said as his hand extended to touch her breast, but he suddenly jerked his hand back as a golden barrier appeared around Rizia's breasts and went down to her thighs. Sungjin clutched at his hand as the guards tried to break the barrier, but it was impenetrable. It looks as though someone does not want you to get our asterisk ped. Well, I guess torture on your arms, face, and legs would do well, even though I was going to do that regardless of anything. Sungjin said with a sadistic grin. From then on, Rizia was forced to create pills for the Fong family while enduring torture. But she never broke. Sungjin would tell her to some explicit things, but she wouldn't do those things, no matter the level of torture she had to endure. And today, she was drugged, but she still didn't lose her mind, and now, these unknown people were taking her away to some unknown place. Can I ask where we are going? Rizia asked as she expected a slap or a snarl in reply. But surprisingly, Mia answered her. We are going to a sect named the Blue Moon Sect, and it is on the western continent. Mia replied as she and Mariel suddenly stopped flying. Night is approaching. The spiritual beasts would be furious, and I don't think we should just hover above the sea. Mariel said to Rizia as Kai suddenly opened his eyes. About time you woke up. Mia commented as Mariel slowly released Kai. A mass memory manipulation while being in the mortal cultivation realms is not a good thing. Let's just teleport back to the sect. Kai said as he massages his forehead and put his hands on Mia and Mariel's shoulders. They then directly appeared in Kai's house as he crashed on the bed. Mia put Rizia down and crashed on the bed beside Kai. Mariel's wings vanished, but instead of crashing down on the bed, she hovered above it. What just happened? Rizia asked in a trembling voice. One moment they were hovering above the ocean and the next moment, they were inside a house. We are at my house in the Blue Moon Sect and I am the current sect master of this sect. Also, this sect is a dual cultivation sect, but don't worry, nobody is going to force you to do anything. Congratulations Rizia, you are no longer a prisoner. Kai said as he sat up. A bright smile covered his face, which for some reason, made Rises relax and let her guard down. All the barriers she had put up broke one by one and tears rolled down her eyes. Kai stood up and hugged her without saying anything. And after many years, Rizia allowed herself to cry in the arms of a person willing to hold her. Chapter 94 Hot Springs Can Do Wonders, Chapter Preview. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After many minutes, Rizia stopped crying and sniffled a little before putting up a brave expression on her face. Can I really believe you? She asked as Kai just smiled. It's nighttime. Sleep for now and I will show you around the sect tomorrow. Kai said as he pointed at his bed. Before she could say anything, Kai teleported Mia and Mariel back to their respective rooms before appearing back in his room. Rizia was continuously staring at the bed before she gulped and went to sit on it. After feeling the softness of the mattress, she slowly lowered herself down and closed her eyes. Kai watched her for a few minutes before he silently exited his house. Even though he knew that no one would enter his house, he still put up a formation around it. After that, he went to the second floor and knocked on Riang's door. It looked as though she was cultivating since she was wearing her robes. Oh, you are back. Please come in. Rising said as she let Kai enter her room. She then closed the door and sat on her bed as Kai stood near her window. Hey Riang, how did you feel when you rescued those abused disciples? Kai suddenly asked and Riang had to ponder for a minute before answering. I felt really happy when I did that. Since I had a terrible childhood, I don't want anyone else to have a childhood like that, so I try to protect as many children as I can and they then grow up to become disciples of this sect. Why did you ask about that? Riang asked as she was confused by Kai's question. I asked about it because I saved many abused people in the last week. I saved a group of people from believing in the wrong thing because of a stupid myth, and I saved an entire continent from the wrath of a corrupted royal family. And in the end, I saved a very important person and brought her here with me. Kai recited what he did with a small smile as Riang gasped. I want to meet her. Riang said with excitement as Kai raised his hand. She's currently asleep. You will meet her tomorrow. Can you announce something for me tomorrow? Kai said as Riang nodded. Then tell the disciples that the day after. Tomorrow I am going to fulfill my duties as the sect master. Any disciple who is willing to cultivate with me can come to my house and I will cultivate with them. Kai said as Riang's jaw dropped. Kai then walked towards the door as Riang suddenly grabbed his arm and stopped him. He turned back to look at her as she opened her mouth to speak. How did you feel when you did those deeds? She asked as she didn't let go of his arm. I felt at peace inside my heart after I saved those people. He replied as Riang smiled and let go of his hand. But after leaving her room, he didn't feel anything. He had lied to her face without feeling anything. It was as though he couldn't feel anything anymore. He then reached his house door as he heard Rizia's screams. He opened the door to find a sweating and panting Rizia sitting on the bed. Nightmares? Kai asked as Rizia slowly nodded. I understand that. After all, I used to have nightmares too. Kai replied as Rizia stared at him in confusion. Did your nightmares stop? She asked as Kai smiled at her sadly. They never stopped. Only I stopped sleeping. He replied as Rizia's jaw dropped. After reaching a certain point in cultivation, cultivators don't need to sleep, eat or drink. But some cultivators did that regardless. Kai didn't understand how he could still live easily without sleeping since he was in the mortal cultivation realms. And other than that, he still had golden blood and demon blood in his veins, which was something impossible. At this point, he didn't know if he reincarnated or transmigrated or if something else happened. The only thing that mattered to him was that some of his harem was with him. If you can't sleep, follow me. Kai said as he extended his hand towards Rizia. She reluctantly took it as he teleported them behind the sect. They were currently in the mixed hot springs, and since he and Elder Min were the only present males in the entire sect, the holy springs were empty. Hot springs can do wonders. Kai said as he sat at the edge of the hot springs and rolled up his jeans to dip his legs in the hot spring. Oh, I forgot. You can wear these. Kai said as he handed Rizia a pair of outer court disciple robes. Even though Rizia was his lover, this Rizia was different than the Rizia he knew. So to make it fair, he didn't give her an instant promotion to core disciple rank. Rizia reluctantly took the robes and went to the changing area. She reappeared wearing her new robes and sat beside Kai as she dipped her feet in the water. You guys seem nice, but you must have a motive for rescuing me. I don't think you did that because your heart said it was the right thing to do. Rizia said as Kai chuckled. I rescued you since you look like someone I know. That person played an important role in my life and I saved her from a very dangerous place once. Because of that I rescued you. Kai replied as Rizia nodded a little. She then looked at his eyes and saw that his eyes were dimmer than before. She frowned and rubbed her eyes to make sure she wasn't imagining things. But after making sure that what she saw was true, she decided those two Kai about it. Why are your eyes dimmer than before? Rizia asked as Kai smiled. It's just a side effect of overusing my powers. He replied as Rizia nodded. Again, he just lied to her face without feeling anything. The reason for this was simple, he couldn't feel anything. When a true demon goes into rampage mode, their raw emotions radiate from their body. But after going back to normal, they can't feel anything for some time. Kai didn't know when his emotions would return. About now, his soul was just a black void devoid of anything. Rizia stopped staring at Kai's face and her eyes suddenly started glowing. She quickly closed them as she saw a scene play out in front of her. She was in a room that looked like it was an alchemy room and she saw herself and Kai standing near a table mixing random ingredients. Kai then took out a pill from a cauldron and jumped in excitement as the other Rizia's face lit up with a smile. We finally created a new pill. Judging from the energy emitting from it, I am pretty sure this is an underwater breathing pill. Kai said as the scene suddenly vanished. Rizia was extremely confused by what she saw. She had only known Kai for a day and she was already dreaming about a future with him. But what if it wasn't a future? What if it was something from the past? Rizia decided to bet on the chance of it being some past memories as she looked at Kai. Do you know about the underwater breathing pill? Rizia asked in the most subtle voice possible. You can create that pill. I killed a traitor who stole those pills from the royal family's treasury. Anyways, believe it or not, I am the one who created that pill. But there was another person who created the pill with me. She was the one I was talking about earlier. Kai replied as Rizia's theory was confirmed. Am I a reincarnation of his lover? Rizia thought but she wasn't able to find the answer. So instead, she asked Kai another question to distract herself. What is your history with those two girls from earlier? Rizia asked as Kai smiled at her question. Both of them are my lovers. Both of them have lived most of their life in palaces, Mariel being a ruler and Mia being a princess. Their lives were full of many hardships and I met both of them at a very bad time even though I met them separately. He chuckled as he remembered the past and his eyes glowed for a minute before returning back to normal. Your eyes are back to normal. Rizia exclaimed as Kai nodded. His emotions were back. He was feeling a mixture of love, hope, joy, and sadness as he talked to Rizia. Both of them then sat there as they looked at the moon above their heads. After an hour or so, Kai stood up and offered Rizia his hand. She took it and he teleported back to his room. Rizia crashed on the bed and this time, her eyes closed and she slept peacefully. Kai's face lit up with a small smile as he saw Rizia sleeping peacefully on his bed. He then soundlessly left the room to watch the moon alone for the rest of the night. Chapter 95 We are getting a privileged access, our point 18, chapter preview, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Rizia woke up to see Kai standing near the door with an amused expression. She couldn't figure out the reason for this amusement. Her eyes then went towards the mattress where she saw a pool of her drool. She quickly closed her mouth and looked at Kai. He just shook his head and told her that he would be waiting for her outside. Rizia stood up and headed towards the bathroom. After taking care of her personal needs, she exited the door. Kai detached himself from a nearby wall and asked her to follow him. Let's start from the entrance of the sect. Kai said as he teleported them at the entrance of the sect. After that, he took her to the 3 courts, Mission Hall, Medicine Hall, and every other notable place in the sect. Riang had already announced that Kai would cultivate with the disciples after a day and the disciples were excited. Everywhere Kai went, disciples would bow to him and would talk in hushed whispers. Rizia was confused by their behavior. What's so good about him? Rizia thought as she examined Kai. His curly purple hair and those bright purple eyes. A smile that could make your day and a handsome face that will be there to console you. As her gaze traveled down, she noticed that his body was built well. The perfect gap between the 2 shoulders and just the right amount of muscles. Especially that golden skin of his. Kai was just the ideal. Wait, since when did she had such thoughts? Rizia shook her head to focus as Kai raised his eyebrows at her as if to whether she was alright or not. She nodded as they came back to his house. Is there a place you want to visit? Kai asked her. Yes, there is a place I want to visit. Rizia said as her eyes darkened. Kai just offered her his hand as they teleported away. They appeared in a green meadow where hundreds of gravestones were placed on the ground. Sis. Rizia whispered as she knelt down and touched a gravestone that had the name, Chunhua, written on it. Was she someone important to you? Kai asked as Rizia nodded. Do you want to talk to her again? Kai asked as Rizia nodded fiercely, tears rolling down her eyes. He closed his eyes and he suddenly appeared in the darkness. He searched around for a bit before he sighed and returned back to the real world. Your friend was quite strong. She already broke through the darkness. At the most, I can give you 15 minutes. Think about your friend. Kai said as he closed his eyes once again. He then touched Rizia's shoulders as she thought about Chunhua. Surprisingly, that she let those memories flow through her as Kai also saw them. He then went back into the darkness as searched for those particular set of memories. Once a soul leaves the darkness, their memories are left behind so that they won't remember anything in their new life. That was the reason babies didn't know anything about the world. Since Chunhua's soul was already gone and was inhabiting a body somewhere in the universe, Kai could only found her memories that were left behind in the darkness. With those memories, he created a personality of Chunhua to relieve Rizia's pain. He then returned to the real world and a glowing light started to rise beside him. Within a few minutes, a ghostly image of Chunhua formed beside him. Rizia covered her mouth with a hand as tears rolled down her cheeks. 10 minutes. You have 10 minutes, Rizia. Kai said as he went away. He appeared 10 minutes later to see a smiling Rizia standing alone near Chunhua's gravestone. She wiped her tears and this time, she offered her hand to Kai. He took it as they teleported back to the sect. Surprisingly, the entire day had passed away like this and night was slowly approaching. Kai then took her to meet Riang. She opened the door with a smile as she looked at Rizia. Riang had to admit that she was shocked to see Rizia's lowly looks but she still smiled at her. Please come inside. She stepped aside as Rizia entered her room. I am sure that some certain people are going to knock at my door to cultivate with me earlier than the others. Please take good care of her. Kai said as he turned around and was about to teleport when Riang asked a question. When will my turn come? She asked as Kai smiled. I will save the best for the last. He said and teleported away to his house. And just like he had said, Nezuko and Yui were standing outside his door with their arms closed. As soon as they saw him, they sighed. We were starting to wonder whether you were at your house or not and I guess you weren't. Nezuko said as Kai chuckled. The three of them then entered his house as he led them towards one of the many rooms in his house. I heard you were going to cultivate with the entire sect tomorrow. Yui said as Kai nodded. Well, we know that you can do that. But we are getting a privileged access to that. We are going to be the first two girls to cultivate with you before you cultivate with the rest of the girls. Nezuko said as she went forward as kissed Kai. She inserted her tongue inside his mouth and wrapped it around his tongue. Kai's hands grabbed her breasts and started groping them. Yui went behind Nezuko and stripped her naked. Kai gently started sucking on her breasts as Yui went near Nezuko's bottom lips. She flicked her clit with her tongue as Nezuko closed her legs around Yui's face. Kai now started to suck her breasts aggressively as Yui's tongue darted inside her pussy. Her warm tongue slowly licked Nezuko's walls as arousal juices started to drip from her pussy. Kai then lifted Nezuko and laid her on the bed. He stripped himself naked and climbed on the bed as he entered Nezuko. She gave a light moan as she intertwined her legs on his waist. He bent down as he sucked on her breasts, enjoying them to his heart's content. While doing so, he put the tip of one of his fingers inside his mouth and coated it with his saliva. His hand then went to Nezuko's red rose as he gently caressed it with his finger. Nezuko's moans intensified as both of her holes were being pleasured. Seeing this, Yui's little sister started to tingle. She quickly removed her clothes and sat on the bed beside Nezuko. She inserted a finger inside her pussy while she used her other hand to fondle her breasts. She started masturbating as arousal juices started to flow out from her cave. Kai on the other hand was slowly taking his time as he brought his finger near Nezuko's clit. He grabbed it with his fingers and slowly started pinching it. More, do it more fiercely. Nezuko screamed as she was taken over by the pleasure. He complied with her request as his speed started to increase. His dick slid in and out of her pussy while hitting good spots as her eyes darkened. Her body twitched as Chi shot out from her caves. She took a few deep breaths as her muscles started to relax. Kai then turned his attention towards Yui, whose cave was already soaking wet. He pushed her down on the bed as his rod easily slid inside her caves. I made you wait for quite some while. Let me make it up to you, Kai said as he sat up and lifted Yui along with him. He then lifted her in the air as he grabbed her waist. He then started pushing his dick inside her as her face morphed into a pleased expression. She intertwined her hands behind Kai's neck as she leaned in to kiss him. Their tongues intertwined as Kai felt a sweet flavor invade his mouth. Chocolate. He thought as he felt the sweetness of chocolate inside Yui's mouth. With that, he pushed her down on his dick and started to thrust her in this manner. Her body bounced on his dick as his hands explored her entire body. Her green hair, white cheeks, raised shoulders, rounded breasts with erect red nipples, smooth waist, sensitive inner thighs, and the silky skin of her ass. Ah, she moaned as her entire body tended from Kai's warm hands. In his arms, her eyes rolled back as Chi started to drip from her cave. Kai also released his yang chi inside her and gently removed her from his dick. He then glanced at the two naked beauties lying unconscious on his bed. After a few minutes, they woke up to see a smiling Kai. Your endurance has increased. We might be able to cultivate till morning, he said as Yui and Nezuko licked their lips in excitement. They got on their knees as Yui took Kai's dick inside her mouth. Nezuko on the other hand kissed Kai as she used her tongue to explore his mouth. His hands also started rubbing their pussies as they soon started to moan. Yui increased her pace as she felt Kai's dick getting warmer. Yang Chi shot out from his dick and filled her mouth as she greedily gulped down every last drop of it. She stepped beside and wiped her mouth as Nezuko took her place. Now Yui's tongue was exploring Kai's mouth as he tasted his yang chi on her tongue. The flavor was something he couldn't explain in words and it took him way back in his life. But this wasn't the time for reminiscing about the past. He had two naked beauties with him and he wasn't about to let them go unsatisfied. His hand went behind Nezuko's head and started pushing her on his dick. He could feel the insides of her warm mouth as he started fucking her. His dick soon grew warm as she pushed his entire dick inside her mouth. Yang Chi traveled down Nezuko's throat as Kai removed his dick from her mouth. He then pushed both the beauties on the bed and started pleasuring them one by one until morning approached. I told you, Kai commented as Nezuko and Yui were lying on either side of him. They cultivated his yang chi in that form and broke through to the third stage of heaven's spirit realm. When they were finally strong enough to walk, they stood up and started wearing their clothes as Kai changed into a new pair of his clothes. You can come and cultivate with me anytime, he said to them as they left his house. It was the beginning of a busy day for him. Chapter 96 How to Fuck Virgins, R.18, Chapter Preview. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As soon as Yui and Nezuko left, a group of ladies approached his house. All of them were in the earth spirit realm and were inner court disciples. He didn't say anything and just stepped aside to let them enter his house. In total, there were 5 ladies, one of them being virgins. It looked as though they were uncomfortable in front of the others, so Kai told the 5 of them to wait outside his door as he called the first disciple. Hello, sect master, the disciple said as she bowed to Kai. She then proceeded to remove her clothes as she blushed and approached Kai, who was calmly sitting on the bed. Slow or fast? Kai asked as the disciple was confused. Fast, she said as Kai nodded. He suddenly stood up and kissed her. Since the disciple was suddenly attacked, her mouth opened under Kai's assault. His tongue entered her mouth and ensnared her tongue. He then removed his clothes as his dragon rose in the air. The disciple stared at it with wide eyes as Kai picked her up and dropped her on the bed. He then used his tongue to stimulate her pussy as she moaned in pleasure. He is at a whole another level. The disciple thought as arousal juices started to drop out of her pussy. After stimulating her pussy for a few minutes, Kai took hold of his rod and pushed it inside her cave. Ah! The disciple moaned in pleasure as Kai's dick slid in and out of her pussy. Within mere minutes, she cummed twice but Kai didn't stop. When she was about to reach her third release, Kai pinched both of her nipples at the same time as her eyes rolled back and her body twitched for some time. Kai then filled her cave with his yang qi and gently put her down on the floor. She woke up after a few minutes, her body completely weak. "Thank you, sect master," she said as she slowly crawled out of the room. When her friends saw her in such a state, they gulped nervously. The second person then entered his room and 10 minutes later, she also crawled out of his room weakly. "Two of you come inside together." Kai's words were heard from inside the room. The two girls who were not virgins nervously entered the room. They saw Kai perched up on the bed naked. They stared at his hard rod which was pointing at the heavens and their little sisters started to tingle. They quickly stripped their clothes and laid down on the bed. Kai wasted no time as he started finger-fucking them. Within minutes, they were moaning as arousal juices flowed out from their pussies. Kai then entered one of them while his hand started groping the other girl's breasts. Both the girls moaned together as Kai pounded the first one and made her come twice. After that, he released his yang qi inside her and entered the second girl's cave. After releasing his yang qi inside her, Kai wore his clothes and picked up both the girls and dropped them outside where the other two girls had already cultivated his yang qi and had broken through to the sky spirit realm. He then looked at the virgin and asked her to enter his room. She slowly went inside his room and closed the door behind them. The disciple started fidgeting nervously as Kai smiled. "Don't worry, I know that you are a virgin, I will be gentle and slow," Kai said as the girl was astonished about this. She then nodded as Kai approached her. He slowly kissed her lips as she intertwined her hands behind his neck. Kai then slowly started to move his mouth as he left a trail of kisses on the disciple's neck. After reaching her shoulders, he gently bit it as she released her first moan. After that, he slowly untied her robes and removed them. She was now standing in her underwear and covered her breasts and lower lips with her hands as her cheeks turned red from embarrassment. Kai didn't force her to remove the rest of her clothes as he gently glided down. His mouth reached the skin over her bra and he pulled back. The disciple slowly lowered her hand from her breasts as Kai touched her hair. He didn't remove the bra immediately as he cupped the breasts with his hands. He gently rubbed them against each other as the disciple covered her mouth with her hand. Kai smiled at her actions as he released her breasts. "You can moan to your heart's content and no one will hear you," Kai said as the disciple removed her hand from her mouth and bottom lips. Kai's hands traveled behind her back as he slowly unhooked her bra. He removed it and looked at her bare breasts as she unconsciously covered them. "Don't worry, that's a natural reaction for some women," Kai reassured her as she removed her hands. He then went near her right nipple and gently touched it with his tongue before he took it between his lips and gently sucked on it. "Ah!" the disciple moaned openly as Kia grabbed her other breast as he alternated between her nipples. He then picked her up and gently dropped her on the bed before his mouth went near her bottom lips. It was still covered by her panty but he could smell the arousal juices that were slowly flowing out of her virgin. "This reminds me of the time I wrote a chapter in my book," Kai thought as he remembered about his manual 101. He had written a chapter in which he had explained how to fuck virgins but that was a long time ago. Coming back to the present, he gently lifted her panty aside as he looked at her virgin pussy. He then gently caressed her pink jewel as she moaned in pleasure. He then removed her panty and she was lying naked on the bed. He then stripped his clothes as his dragon was unleashed once again. So big. The disciple whispered as Kai chuckled. Don't worry, I will first stimulate your pussy and then I will slowly enter you. Kai told her as he gently rubbed her caves. After a few minutes of rubbing it, Kai started teasing her entrance with the tip of his dick. The disciple gulped in anticipation as Kai slowly pushed it inside her cave. Ah, she moaned in pleasure and pain as Kai's dick tore through her virgin walls. But he suddenly stopped as he felt something blocking the advance of his dragon. This something was something that Kai had faced many times while he was ravaging virgins. He had many years of experience on this matter as he slightly pushed back. His dick started to glow as he went further. His dick tore through the obstruction as the disciple released a cry of pain. But the pain vanished as she could only feel pleasure as Kai's entire dick was now inside her. I will slowly start moving. It would be painful at first but soon you will only feeling pleasure. Kai said as the disciple nodded. The golden light surrounding his dick vanished as the disciple gritted her teeth in pain. Kai slowly started moving as the disciple moaned. After a few minutes, the pain slowly started vanishing as her face morphed into a pleased expression. Now I would start the real thing. Kai said with a smile as the disciple stared at him in confusion. He then grabbed her waist as his speed started to increase. The disciple's eyes widened in shock as her moans also increased. She is having the best time of her life. One of her friends outside said as she remembered her cultivation session. Yeah, you are right. Sect Master is so handsome and his techniques are so good. I wish he would be around the sect daily so that I can cultivate with him. Another disciple said as all of them were lost in their thoughts. BL.net 10 minutes, the door opened as their friend came out of the door. Surprisingly she was still standing on her feet. He let me cultivate with his yang qi inside so that I could walk. The disciple said before any of them could ask anything from her. I hope you enjoyed our session and it will take you a week to recover. You can come and cultivate with me after a week. Kai said as the ladies bowed to him and left. He went inside and sat on his bed but he didn't cultivate the yin qi he had just gathered. He was already at the 10th stage of the Imperial Spirit Realm and he had enough yin qi to break through to the Divine Spirit Realm. But he didn't cultivate it since he would have to leave the mortal cultivation realm the second he broke through. Or until this world forcefully kicks me out. He muttered to himself as more and more disciples started to gather around his house. But for now, I have an entire sect to cultivate with. He said again and opened the door to embrace a new girl. Chapter 97 Warming his bed with the entire sect, our point 18, chapter preview, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Kai's lips curled up as he saw more than 100 girls standing outside his house. It took him back to a time when he had fucked an entire continent and that included millions of girls. And that was how he got perfect control over his dick. So compared to that, 1,000 was a small number. He could detect many virgins among the crowd as more and more disciples started to gather around. He pointed at the girl standing in front of the line and gestured for her to enter his house. She was excited at this and quickly followed him inside. Take off your clothes and get on the bed. Kai instructed as the girl obeyed. As soon as she got on the bed, Kai started licking her pussy while groping her breasts. She was moaning in no time flat as she came thrice into Kai's mouth. He then removed his clothes and pushed his entire dick inside her in one big thrust. He then started moving and within a minute, the girl and cummed 2 more times. She then fainted as Kai released his yang qi inside her. After waking up, the girl quietly cultivated the yang qi and broke through to the 10th stage of the sky spirit realm. She thanked Kai before she wore her clothes and left his house. When the crowd saw her, they went silent. How was it? One of them asked. Blissful. It was as though I was in heaven. And my cultivation soared through the radar. She said as she released her cultivation. The crowd gasped as they remembered that the disciple was at the 5th stage of the earth spirit realm before she went inside. And with that, all of them started entering his house one by one. While Kai was cultivating with the disciples, Mia and Mariel were destroying cities. One of them would create a representation of a city with their ice or fire and the other would destroy it. They were trying to see who would be the quicker one to destroy a city. What do you think Kai is doing? Mariel asked as she created an inferno to destroy Mia's city of ice. My guess. He is currently warming his bed with the entire sect. Mia replied. Do you know that he has a record of cultivating with 80 million women? Mariel asked as Mia's eyes widened. I thought that the record was 20 million. She said as Mariel shook her head. That was the record set by the previous Harem Overlord who was a female. She cultivated with 20 million females and created that record. Kai on the other hand cultivated with 80 million women and quadrupled the previous Harem Overlord's record. Mariel explained as Mia nodded. Then he should be done by now. Mia said as she looked at her city of ice melting before her eyes. And that was the last disciple. Kai said as the last disciple of the sect left his house. I guess I have 2 special people I have to take care of. Kai muttered to himself with a smile as he teleported to the Xian family's castle. Watanabe isn't in the cave nor is Kiana. They are not even in the palace. Kai said as he spread his spiritual sense on the entire palace. He then teleported into the throne room and was surprised to see that the throne room was empty as well. And one by one, every single cultivator inside the palace started to vanish and this started happening to everyone on the entire continent. But Kai didn't panic. Instead, he laughed as 2 purple wings unfolded from his back. His eyes went completely purple as he used his demonic side to break the illusion he was in. Yo Azazel. You will have to try better than that to fool me. Kai smiled as Azazel appeared in front of him. This time, instead of golden eyes, Azazel's eyes were a mixture of black and red. The white part was replaced with black while his pupils were blood red. He had blue hair and a pair of black wings unfolded from his back. His face was set in a creepy grin as his eyes examined Kai's wings. So when did you realize that you were under an illusion? Azazel asked as his wings folded back. Perhaps I was under an illusion from the moment I checked Juan's memory, or you might have snatched me after I cultivated with the last girl. But in reality, the moment I saw that girl standing in front of the crowd, I knew that you had a seal on her mind. Kai replied as Azazel raised his eyebrows. And you still let yourself fall into this illusion? Azazel asked as Kai smiled. Because of that girl, I know where you are. That girl didn't contain any traces of this continent or the other 2 continents that I visited. This obviously states that you are either on the eastern continent or the northern continent. Kai said as Azazel's eyes widened in mock surprise. How do you know that I am in this realm? Azazel asked, expecting a good reply, and Kai didn't disappoint him. The only way for you to place that seal on the people of the central continent and that girl is if you possess a human on this realm. And since you said that your cage has a permanent crack in it, I am sure that you can now reach other realms and possess people there. Kai said as Azazel cackled. Who could have known that after so many millenniums, I will find someone like you? I will wait for our next showdown. Azazel said as Kai's surroundings changed and he was back in his room. His appearance was back to normal as his demon eyes and wings vanished. I guess I still have an entire sect waiting for me. Kai said as he started summoning the disciples one by one. He cultivated with them in a similar pattern. Removing their clothes, stimulating their pussies, pushing his dragon inside their caves, and finally, fucking them dry. Then there were a few disciples who wanted to experience his massage and he gave them his service. Some girls even said that they wanted to be in a threesome and he was more than happy to oblige with their requests. The last disciple moaned in ecstasy as Kai released his yang qi inside her. She cultivated and thanked him as she left his house. He had spent an entire week cultivating with the disciples, and some of them had come back for a second serving of his yang qi. After he was done, he went to meet Mia and Mariel, who were surprisingly doing missions, so he had to teleport to the mission hall to talk to them. Well, that took longer than I expected, Kai said as Mia and Mariel raised their eyebrows simultaneously. Most men could hardly last for 10 minutes, and you survived for an entire week in which you fucked about 500 girls. Mia said as Kai shrugged. I think there are a few people left who didn't cultivate with, and that includes us. Mariel said as she held up 5 fingers to indicate the number of people that were left. I will cultivate with you after I am done with the other 3. But before cultivating I will tell you something important, he said as he vanished, leaving behind 2 confused girls. I wish we could hear what he is thinking, cause that brain of his is seriously messed up, Mia commented as the 2 of them started looking at missions. As for Kai, he appeared in front on the Xian family's palace, which was brimming with people. He used his spiritual sense to see that Watanabe was in a room while Kiana was in the arena with a group of girls which included Lavina. Kai decided that he would first cultivate with Watanabe and would then go and meet Kiana and Lavina. As he teleported to the room Watanabe was in, he was surprised by his surroundings. It was as though this room wanted to challenge the Blue Moon sect's blue appearance with its own pink appearance. Be it the bed, curtains, wallpaper or anything else, the room was entirely pink. She had told me that her favorite color is pink, but I guess she forgot to mention her obsession with this color. Kai chuckled as the door to the room opened. Watanabe entered and blinked for a second before looking around the room to see if she was in her own room or not. I sometimes forget that you can teleport from one place to another, she commented as she entered the room and closed the door behind her. So any particular reason for your visit? Watanabe asked as she sat on the bed. Well, I am here to ask Asahi if I can marry his mother, Kai replied in a serious tone, and Watanabe was stunned by his reply. Marriage? I don't. She stuttered as Kai laughed. Even though I am here for a different reason, if you want, I can ask Asahi and marry you today, Kai said as Watanabe's face went red with embarrassment. She pouted as Kai placed his hands on her shoulders. He then pulled her closer to him and kissed her lips. He gently grazed on her lower lip as Watanabe's hands went below his shirt and explored his muscles. Watanabe then pulled back as she licked her lips. She then laid herself down as she surrendered herself to Kai. Let's take it slowly, Kai said as he slowly removed her clothes. Chapter 98 Let's Try Something New, our Point 18, Chapter Preview, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 98 Let's Try Something New, our Point 18, Chapter Preview. Watanabe was lying naked on the bed as Kai's hands started glowing. He traced the outlines of her nipples with his fingers as a warm feeling engulfed Watanabe's body. That's so warm, Watanabe purred slowly as Kai rubbed her waist. It made her feel as though she was in heaven. Kai then grabbed her breasts as he slowly rubbed them against each other. While doing that, he groped the flesh of breasts between his fingers as waves of heat passed through his hands into Watanabe's body. Ah, she released a low moan as arousal juices started to drip from her pussy. Seeing this, Kai's fingers traveled to her entrance. He inserted a finger inside her caves as her walls suddenly clinged to his finger. Her knees tightened around his arm as she cummed. Yin Qi dripped from Kai's finger as he took his finger out from her caves and licked it. So, how was it? Kai asked as Watanabe's body relaxed. It was a heavenly experience, Watanabe said as Kai removed his clothes. But I want to try something new, Watanabe said in a seductive voice as Kai smiled. Then let's try something new, Kai said as he grabbed her thighs and lifted her a little. He then reached forward with his tongue as he licked her pink rosebud. It was tight but Kai's tongue slowly entered it. But he removed it as he inserted his finger inside her asshole. She gasped as Kai used his hand to stretch her asshole. After stretching it for a few minutes, Kai inserted a second finger inside it. Ah, Watanabe moaned as she felt her small hole getting stretched. Anal sex should be done carefully, but you are in the hands of an expert, so don't worry, Kai said before he removed his fingers from her asshole. He then took hold of his dick and slowly pushed the tip inside her asshole. Ah! She cried out as Kai pushed even more of his dick inside her. After half of it was inside her, he stopped to let her get used to the feeling of his dick. After 5 minutes, he pushed his entire dick inside her. Watanabe panted a little as she was getting used to the feeling of having Kai's dick inside her asshole, but after a few minutes, she signaled for him to move. At first, he slowly started moving as Watanabe felt a mixture of pain and pleasure engulf her body. But after a few minutes of slow moving, the pain slowly started to vanish as Kai increased his speed. Now he was moving at a ferocious speed as Watanabe's ass started bouncing. But she soon stopped him and told him to sit back. With his dick still inside of her asshole, Watanabe slowly put herself on top of it before she started moving up and down on it. Kai's dick explored the depths of her asshole as she started rubbing her clit with her hands. While she was doing that, Kai decided to use his hands to fondle her breasts. Ah! After half an hour of intense assfucking, Watanabe finally came as Chi shot out from her front hole. Kai also released his yang chi in her asshole and removed his dick from it. Now both her holes were dripping 2 different kinds of chi as she took a few deep breaths. Her asshole was completely stretched as it slowly started to return to its original shape. That was definitely something new and fun, Watanabe said as she sat up and took hold of Kai's rod. She then bent forward and wrapped her tongue around the tip of it. Some drops of his yang chi still covered the head of his dick and Watanabe drank it greedily. Kai hadn't told this to anyone that his yang chi could also be used as a drug. If given in small quantities after particular intervals of time, it could be used a drug that would make the other person do anything to obtain it. But the effect vanished after they reached a certain stage in their cultivation, so hardly anyone used it. And other than that, they would have to face Kai's wrath if they did this. But it didn't matter now as Kai released his yang chi inside Watanabe's mouth and let her gulp it greedily. Suddenly, there was a knock on Watanabe's door as she silently stared at it. "This better be worth my time or I am going to kill," she yelled out loud as the person standing outside the door spoke. My lady, Lord Asahi is requesting your presence in the throne room. He has to talk about something related to someone's marriage." The servant standing outside spoke in a trembling voice as Watanabe sighed. "Tell him that I will be there in 5 minutes," she said to the servant as he left. Just when the fun part was starting, Watanabe sighed in disappointment as she wished that for that moment, she wasn't an ancestor. But Kai didn't say anything as he grabbed her waist and pushed his dick inside her cave. She moaned at the sudden assault as she stared at his face. "We only have 5 minutes," she said even though she didn't care about that. "Then we will do it quickly," Kai said with a grin as he started moving. Watanabe, not caring about anything, intertwined her arms around his neck as she cummed. Kai also released his yang chi inside her. "You can cultivate it later on. Let's go and see what this marriage thing is," Kai said as the two of them wore their clothes. Kai then teleported them to the throne room where Asahi and his court was in session. Asahi was surprised to see Kai with Watanabe, but he soon smiled. "Now this makes my job much easier than before. I was about to ask Mother to go call you, but I guess there's no need for that. Anyways, please sit here." He pointed at the nearest to his throne and asked Kai to sit there. Kai obliged and sat there as Watanabe moved to stand beside the throne. She then hovered in the air as it was better than standing. "Today, we are here for choosing the crown successor for the continent, and let's start by calling my sons and daughters. Asahi announced happily as the princes and princesses of the western continent entered the throne room. In the Xian family, the successor of the crown is decided by the current ruler, the ancestor, and the council of ministers. This time, the two candidates for the crown are Kiana and Lavina. Watanabe told Kai as he examined the Asahi's children. They will marry people from the four great families and other families which wield influence in the continent, including the four great sections. That's why he wanted me here. Kai said back as Lavina and Kiana came to the front. My two daughters, Lavina who is the host of the Black Tiger, and Kiana who is the host of the Pure White Tiger, are the candidates for the crown. Asahi announced as Lavina and Kiana smiled. However, Kai could easily tell that Kiana was really nervous since she hadn't been living in the palace for a long time. If it wasn't for her being the host of the Pure White Tiger, she probably wouldn't be considered as a contender for the crown. Whereas Lavina had been living in the palace since her birth and had a more deeper bond with the Black Tiger. So in other words, she was the perfect person to rule the continent. But that's where the problem came. If Lavina became the ruler of the continent, Kai wouldn't be able to leave the mortal cultivation world without her. Which of these idiots is good enough to become a ruler? Kai thought as he gazed at the other heirs. All of them had white or yellow in their eyes or hair since it was the mark of the white tiger. Kai checked Asahi's memories to see who was the most suitable person for crowning the throne. All of them are useless. Kai thought in confusion as Asahi's memories told him that all the other heirs were arrogant royals who abused their powers since they knew who the ruler would be. Since I am not going to waste our time, I might as well tell you that Lavina is going to be the next ruler and she can marry anyone she wants to. As for Lavina, her husband is already here. Asahi said with a grin as he pointed at Kai. People started clapping as Kai wondered whether he should stand up or not. He decided that standing for such a small matter was not worth it, so he just sat there. Kiana walked to sit beside him and she stumbled a little on her way. As she reached in front of him, Kai snapped his fingers as his seat expanded to a luxurious couch. Everyone in the court stared at the couch as Kiana slowly sat on it. She couldn't believe how comfortable it was. She just smiled and intertwined her hand with Kai's hand. He then stared at her face as he asked her an important question. Did you agree to the marriage on your own accord, or did Asahi told you to do it for the royal family's benefit? Kai whispered as Kiana shook her head. I agreed to it as I love you and I declined the throne since I know that you hate boring things and drama, and ruling a continent is apparently the most boring and overly dramatic job. Did you want to rule the continent? Kiana asked with a puzzled face. Kai shook his head but Kiana's face tightened. She took a deep breath and closed her yes. She then opened them after a few minutes and steeled herself. Kai, do you love me? She asked in a shaking voice as Kai smiled. You don't ask someone if they love you. If they love you, they show you their love by action and not words since words can lie. But if you want his answer, then I do love you. Kai said as he kissed Kiana in front of everyone. That was smooth. Watanabe murmured as Asahi laughed. Kai just smiled and pulled back as his eyes flickered over Lavina. I guess I will have to kidnap you. Kai thought with a smile as he remembered how he met Lavina. Chapter 99 How He Met Lavina, Past, Chapter Preview. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 99 How He Met Lavina, Past Chapter Preview. Hello readers, this is the author here and I want to inform you guys that chapters containing the past chapter bracket are optional chapters. These chapters will be focused on how Kai met certain members of his harem and will be written from his perspective in the past. In simpler terms, you won't find the words younger version of Kai or his past version anywhere. Hope you like these details on how he met them. I said that I will do it but I am not that sure anymore. Kai muttered as he glanced around the arena. He was currently standing in an arena that was situated near the palace of Lavina, the elemental ruler of lightning. Even though he had told Mariel that he would take care of Lavina, Kai wasn't sure if he could actually do it. Sure, he was strong and had a high level of cultivation, but his opponent was the ruler of lightning who had been alive for a very long time. Well, here goes nothing, Kai said as the crowd suddenly started clapping. Lavina landed gracefully in the center of the arena, her silky white hair tied behind her head in a ponytail. She was wearing white robes that looked as though they were made from lightning, as Kai could see a few sparks of lightning traveling throughout her clothes. So your name is Ayak and you are going to be my latest opponent, Lavina said as she examined Kai. He had to change his name and appearance since he was the most wanted person on the spirit realm. He was wearing purple robes, which were the common dress for the lightning spirits. His hair was still purple, but they were completely flattened against his head, and his face looked like an average person's face with normal black eyes. As Lavina was examining him, he too started examining her. It was easy for him to tell that she was sealing more than half of her cultivation, which made sense since she was very old and was very close to reaching the peak of cultivation. She is approximately as strong as a divine core realm cultivator, and I am only at the spiritual core realm. It would be difficult to even think about bruising her, much less defeating her. But still, I have to try, Kai thought as a spirit started to count backward. 3, 2, 1. Begin. The entire place burst with cheers as Lavina moved, lightning flickering around her entire body. Left leg and right shoulder. Kai closely followed her movements with his eyes, but it was difficult to do it since she was moving at an extremely fast speed. But he was able to predict her moves in time as he moved to dodge her attacks in time. But she suddenly surprised him when she swept his legs. He hit the ground with a thump as blue lightning traveled throughout Lavina's right leg. She raised his leg and put it above his heart, her lightning dot covered foot an inch above from his skin. In a real battle, you would be dead by now, she commented and turned back as she walked away. Kai stood up and brushed the dust off his clothes, and for some unknown reason, his lips curled up to form a smile. I have been defeated by many people, but she knocked me off my feet within a minute after the match began. This is interesting, he muttered to himself before he raised his hands to his mouth. I will be back to challenge you, he shouted at the top of his lungs as Lavina stopped and turned back to look at him. We will see, she said and disappeared with a burst of lightning. I have to raise my cultivation to a higher level, Kai vowed as he exited the arena and teleported away to tell Mariel that he had failed. That spirit had an odd aura. It was similar to the aura of a human, demon, and But how could a spirit have an aura of 3 other species? I will have to keep an eye on him, Lavina muttered to herself as she entered her palace, her mind lingering on the thoughts about a spirit who was more than what met the eye. But she wasn't able to find a spirit named Ayak anywhere in her area on the spirit realm. The spirit realm didn't have any continents on it, nor did it have any water, air, or practically anything on it. It was colorless and no one could see it in the starry sky. It was instead divided into 7 special realms that were accessed using certain spots on a planet that was almost transparent. Only spirits were able to see the colorless realm, but even they wouldn't be able to find the 7 realms if they didn't know what they were looking for. After that, each realm was governed by 7 spirits and they were titled as the elemental rulers. An elemental ruler had certain privileges while they were in their own realm, but outside it, they were normal cultivators with a very high level of cultivation. But despite being a ruler for such a long time, Lavina wasn't able to find a spirit named Ayak in her realm. She released her frustration in the arena battles until one day, Ayak came back. He still looked the same, but his gaze was more focused and he had a higher cultivation than last time. Kai had just spent many centuries training himself. He had cultivated with more women than he could have imagined, and his cultivation was now a realm below Lavina's sealed one. I told you I would come back, Kai commented as Lavina narrowed her eyes. She decided to first battle him and then interrogate him for information about his residence and mixed aura. As soon as the battle began, she came behind him and kicked him in the abdomen, but surprisingly, she only hit an afterimage as Kai had vanished from his spot. His eyes glowed a little as normal purple lightning covered his entire body. He directed it at Lavina as a bolt of light was released from his hands. Lavina's hand also lit up with lightning as a blue bolt of lightning was released from her hand. The two bolts of lightning collided mid-air and Lavina's lightning cut through Kai's lightning as though it was made from paper. But that was only a distraction as he suddenly appeared behind Lavina and pierced her stomach with his lightning-covered hand. She didn't even flinch as white blood, the blood of a spirit, flowed out from her wound. But before Kai could move away, Lavina's muscles tightened around his hand and trapped him. Perfect body control. He thought in awe as lightning ran through her body and traveled throughout Kai's body. Arg! He screamed in pain as his insides started to burn from the lightning. His skin started to ashen and blood started coming out from his ears and eyes. But before he could die because of electrocution, he cut his arm in half as the lightning stopped. He felt as though he would faint as unimaginable pain took over his body. He dizzily jumped back and took a pill from his pendant with his other hand. He quickly swallowed it as his decapitated arm grew back and his injuries vanished. He then stared at Lavina carefully as he saw her injuries starting to heal. "Next fight will be the one where I will defeat you," he said as Lavina moved forward to catch him and stop him. But she only came in contact with an afterimage as Kai had already vanished. After that match, Lavina stopped thinking about him as she knew that he would be back to challenge her once again. And he did come back, this time with the same cultivation as her. His eyes were more focused than ever as both of them got on the arena stage for the third time. As soon as the match started, both of them disappeared and met in the middle of the arena. They started punching, kicking, dodging, or blocking as the spirits gathered there were only able to see their afterimages. "You really think that you can beat me with such easy moves?" Levian scoffed as she launched a lightning wolf at Kai. "I have been waiting for you to launch your lightning," Kai said with a smile as black flames suddenly danced around his hand. Lavina stopped and stared at the flames in Kai's hands. She had seen them before and the person who used those flames was the most wanted person on. "You." For once, Lavina was completely stumped as Kai launched a small fireball the size of a marble towards her. The flames engulfed her lightning and reached her in a heartbeat. But she was aware of them and easily swatted them away. But she was not careful enough as a spark of the flames caught the sleeve of her robes. Her entire shoulder was burnt before her other hand started glowing with lightning. She cut her shoulder to stop the advance of the lightning as her detached arm fell on the ground. A new arm grew in a matter of seconds as she stared at Kai, whose appearance changed back to normal. And for some reason, he had the nerve to grin. It was then that she truly started hating him, even though a feeling of curiosity started to bloom inside her. Chapter 100 We have a year at the most, chapter preview. You are listening at novelfull.audio. That was definitely a satisfying moment to see Lavina's face full of shock. Kai thought to himself as he stared at the current version of Lavina in front of him. The marriage between Kai and Kiana will take place after 2 weeks. Every family and sect on the Western continent should be invited to make this the biggest wedding anyone has ever seen. Asahi said to the court as everyone clapped. But between their claps and moments of joy, no one noticed the evil smile on Kai's face. His mind was already forming a plan that would take place on his wedding day. After all, he was an expert at organizing weddings, being the groom in weddings, and crashing weddings. After all, his lovers were his legal wives, so he had to organize grand weddings for himself and his bride many times. Let's see what will happen in a week. He thought and stood up. He said his farewell to Kiana and Watanabe and teleported back to the sect. Before cultivating with Riang, he decided to tell Mia and Mariel a very important truth. Both of them were in their separate houses, peacefully cultivating before he suddenly grabbed them and brought them to his house. "I don't have much time left," Kai said the second they settled down. They stared at each other in confusion, neither understanding what Kai was talking about. They stared at him as he sighed. I will start from the beginning. When I was in true demon rampage mode, I destroyed the spiritual core of the central continent. The realm had pushed all that spiritual energy towards me, and before I could do anything, my cultivation rose to the 10th stage of the Imperial Sprint realm. But you already know this. The thing is, the realm was actually trying to push me out of the mortal cultivation realm. As both of you know, Divine Spirit Realm is the last stage of the mortal cultivation realms, and after breaking through to that realm, a cultivator would either have to take a divine tribulation to advance to an upper realm, or he would be thrown out by the realm. But since the highest level of cultivation achievable in this realm is the 8th stage of the Imperial Spirit Realm, that could never happen. But with all that spiritual energy inside me, I was on the verge of a breakthrough, but I stopped myself at the last second. But the realm was still able to mark me, and no matter what I do, I will be thrown out of this realm after some time. Kai finished as Mia and Mariel blinked at him. We already knew that. We were waiting for you to tell us about that so that we could ask you some questions. We were just giving you some time and space. Mia commented as Mariel pouted. Do you think we are dumb? She asked as Kai smiled. Both of you are definitely intelligent. After all, you are my wives. Kai said with a smile. You are marrying someone. Mia said as both of them narrowed their eyes. Kai started sweat dropping as Mia and Mariel fixed him with a glare. Even though he was extremely overpowered, his lovers were terrifying when they were angry, so Kai had to make sure that he didn't make any mistakes to anger them. I am marrying Kiana. He replied under pressure as their faces lit up with smiles. Oh, that's all right, Kiana is a good person. Mia said as Kai sighed in relief. But do not forget that you still have to save my sister. Mariel said as her cat-like eyes stared into Kai's eyes. He nodded as she finally stopped staring at him. If Kai had to choose between destroying a realm or facing the glares of his beauties, he would choose to destroy a realm in a heartbeat. It's really hard to tell you guys about such things. I remember that 10 suns exploded when I told Sun Goddess that I had a harem, and the air around me had vanished when I, the elemental ruler of wind, found it that I already had a few wives. Kai recalled his past experiences as Mia and Mariel laughed. Compared to that, we were quite subtle. Mia said with a smile as Kai shook his. Anyways, how much time do we have before we will have to leave? Mia asked in serious tone as Mariel nodded in accordance with her question. At the most, a year. At least, 6 months. Kai replied as the two of them stared at the ceiling grimly. Before my marriage, we are going to explore the eastern continent. But before that, I am going to cultivate with Riang. Kai announced as he walked out of the door. He never changes. Mia sighed as the two of them went back to their respective houses and started cultivating. Kai knocked on Riang's door and he was surprised to see Rizia open the door. It looked as though Rizia was also surprised to see him as her eyes widened. Guess who decided to show up? She said to Riang, who moved to stand beside her. How was your bonding experience with her? Kai asked as he saw that Rizia was now at the first stage of the Earth Spirit Realm. At first, she didn't want to talk to me, but after 3 days, she slowly opened up to me when I told her about my past. In a way, our childhoods were same, but the difference was that I escaped and she was caught. Riang replied in a sad voice as Kai entered the room. Since there was only a single bed in the room, he summoned the royal couch he had taken out in the throne room as he settled down on it. Even his couch is so royal. Riang thought in wonder as Rizia stared at the entire couch with eyes. What were you doing for the past 8 days? Rizia asked in a sharp tone as Kai and Riang exchanged looks. I was cultivating for the past week before I had to go to the royal palace. Xian Asahi, who is the ruler of the western continent, set my marriage with Kiana, who is a lost princess of the continent and is the host of the pure white tiger. Kai explained as Rizia tried to process this information. If you are getting married, then what about those 2 girls who were with you? Rizia asked as Kai smiled. Mariel and Mia have been my wives for a very long time. And I have already told them about my marriage with Kiana and they have no problem with it. Kai replied as Rizia's jaw dropped. But won't they be jealous that there is another woman between them and you? Rizia asked as Kai stared at Riang, who for some reason was trying hard to not stare at him. What did you teach her? Kai asked. A bead of sweat dropped from Riang's forehead. BL.net, honestly, you should just go and ask them how they feel about my latest marriage. Kai said to Rizia, who jumped in excitement. See you later Wani.san. Rizia bowed to Riang before she hurried out of the room, eager to meet Mia and Mariel and question them. Now that we are alone, let's talk about Rizia. Kai said with an evil smile as Riang gulped nervously. That girl is the most curious person I have ever met. Once she opened up to me, she asked me about the sect, the continent, the leading families, and all that. After that, she took out very curious-looking pill from her clothes and swallowed it in front of me. Within minutes, her cultivation rapidly rose from the first stage of the Een gathering realm to the first stage of the Earth spirit realm. I was so shocked that I could barely speak. She said that the pill was something she had created and it was known as the breakthrough pill. Do you know about that pill? Riang asked. That girl. She already knows how to create a breakthrough pill even though it is for a lower realm, but still, it must have been a pure quality pill if it made her advance by an entire realm. Too bad that the mortal cultivation realm cannot provide me with the ingredients to make a higher version of the pill, or I could have easily broken through to the imperial spirit realm the moment I arrived at the Blue Moon sect. Kai thought with a sigh. Yeah, I know about that pill. Many cultivators use that pill to break through to a higher realm, but it only works till the divine spirit realm, and after breaking through to the next realm, the pill is useless. Kai replied as Riang stared at him in confusion. Divine spirit realm. I thought that was just a myth since no cultivator has ever achieved that realm. Riang replied as Kai shook his head. Forget about that. I said that I will save the best for the last. It's your time to shine. Kai said as Riang smiled and intertwined her arms behind his neck.